All right, welcome to CEO Money TV. I'm Michael Yorba, your host. Thanks for joining us. I've got a special guest, and his name is Arch Crawford. He has been in the industry for well over 40 years as a market timer and cyclical analyst using a special skill, astrology, to forecast the market. We've got a serious set of how shall I put it, aspects coming up and some eclipses we're going to talk about. Arch, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Delighted to be here, Michael.
You're welcome. All right, now you have got some really provocative statements about these eclipses that are coming up in July. Let's get some background on this before we talk about the current ones that are coming up. We've had some eclipses in the past that you noted through periodicals that are world-renowned. I think it was Barron's that had an article on the similar type of eclipses that occurred years ago. Can you get us up to speed on what happened last time you made this forecast, and then let's go into what you think is going to happen now?
Well, the ones that I mentioned in the letter were extremely powerful ones, unusually powerful ones, which these two are, because the first one is the lunar eclipse is conjunct Pluto, really, really tight. So I expect it to be a big deal, much bigger than just a regular eclipse. And the second eclipse on the 27th is conjunct. I forget which is conjunct and which is opposite, but one of them is opposite one and one is conjunct the other. Mars is involved in the second one on the 27th of July. And those speak for major transformations. They can be negative. The ones I mentioned in the newsletter was that when we had a lunar eclipse on Pluto in '86, 4 days later, Chernobyl melted down. And one of the things that it means about Pluto is radiation. And of course, it raised the radiation levels all over the world. And the second one is involved with Mars, which is the god of war. And the Mars cycles, which I've calculated statistically, are extremely powerful in the Dow Jones going back to 1885.
Right. Now, let's dive into that. The ramifications to the markets and to economies and the geopolitical events. What is your thought on the July 12th solar eclipse, and then coming up, I think you've got it listed July 27th for the lunar eclipse? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, if it's going to affect markets negatively, they don't always, but sometimes they do. Like the one that hit Chernobyl. The next 3 or 4 weeks, the market went down about 6%, I think it was. And whether that's relative to the eclipse or not is not a guarantee. But I've seen eclipses be major turning points and very sharp turning points, or big down days or big up days. Now, the history of that goes back to W.D. Gann. Most traders remember the name W.D. Gann from the early 20th century, and one of the things he said about astrology was to watch the equinoxes and the solstices and the middle day between them, and also to watch eclipses. And he wrote 7 books on the market. He didn't say much of anything else about the planetary things. But the man who bought his papers from the 30s or earlier said that he had huge numbers of price action charts with astrological notations all over them. Also, I'd like to clear up one point. I was a technical analyst at Merrill Lynch when I read about people who use astrology in the markets on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So I went and met them all and bought their books. And then I did my own research. And as far as I know, I'm the only person or the first person who actually calculated percent changes in the Dow back to its beginning, 1885. Average percent changes in a great many different astronomic related events.
All right. So what we need to do is understand closely the July 12th solar eclipse, 20 degrees Cancer, 1047 Eastern, opposes Pluto. So and that's the one that's closely resembles the April of '86 Chernobyl meltdown. So what I'm getting from that, and I want you to straighten me out on this, is that there's a possibility that we could have some kind of a nuclear catastrophe that could be a mistake or something done on purpose in and around that period based on the history of the eclipse relative to the aspects of Pluto. Is that right?
Yes, but Pluto has also some other meanings, and it could affect it in any of those other areas. Now, I mentioned the one that was the closest like this one, and that was the Chernobyl. Now, both of them, when there's been a Mars and the Pluto involved, was the day that Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait. And they'd mentioned that in Barron's, what I said about that. And I think they were amused by it, and they were shocked when it actually happened. Something violent. There could be violence. There could be another terrorist event, or there could be another mass shooting. Something, but it's both are very powerful and very dangerous.
Got it. All right, Arch, there's more that we want to talk to you about, but for now, I wanted to at least give you the opportunity to get that message out so people have a chance to prepare and shore up their accounts in case something, something unexpected and global in scope applies. Thanks so much for being on the show, Arch. I appreciate it.
Delighted. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for watching. You've been listening and watching CEO Money with Michael Yorba and our special guest, Arch Crawford of Crawford Perspectives.